This is Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WNYC, and WHYY. I'm Nancy Solomon. We're down to the very last year of the governor's term. Tonight we'll talk about what he wants to accomplish. He's got his fists up, and how hard that agenda becomes with Donald Trump back in the White House. Listeners, what do you want to see the governor get done in his last year? Has life improved in the 7 years since Chris Christie? Call us with your questions for the governor at 844-745-8255. We'll also be taking your questions via social media using the hashtag AskGovMurphy. The number again, 844-745-8255. We're joined now by Governor Phil Murphy. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Nancy. It is cold out there, by the way. I just raced in from Passaic County, and it is cold.
And windy.
Yes. Good to be with you.
It is a cold
and the
night.
Dave Mathau.
Yes.
More on him later.
I will introduce you in a moment. Let's start with a few current events before we dig into some of the larger issues we're going to talk about tonight. On Monday, Congress certified the presidential election results, a perfunctory task that is, no longer perfunctory. As a Democrat, how did you feel about it?
Well, it is what it is. I'm going to answer this, Nance, less as a Democrat than I am going to answer it as an American. And I think it's outrageous that everybody feels the collective memory on what happened 4 years ago Monday has been basically expunged, that folks got away with it. And we reelected someone who denied that he lost the first time, when in fact the evidence is indisputable and overwhelming. I think there are 3 third rails that cannot, and probably more, but at least 3 that occurred to me that cannot be crossed. And that's one of them. Respect the results of elections, even when you lose. And Kamala Harris, to her credit, of course, had to, like Al Gore did in January of 2001, had to preside over basically the resolution that she lost and Al Gore had lost before her. You got to respect the results, even when you lose. Secondly, you have to respect institutions. It's one thing to make them more efficient, and I hope they can. I'm all for that. By the way, we try to do that every day in New Jersey. But you can't weaponize them, which these folks are talking about doing. Or you can't destroy them if they're doing good. And then thirdly, senatorial courtesy. I just hope, we have a lot as Americans riding on a few, God willing, brave Republicans who are going to do the right thing as it relates to especially some of these cabinet nominees who would never, ever, ever in any other environment have passed muster. We have to pray that the Senate's responsibility, not just the courtesy to the Senate, but their responsibility is carried out. And that's going to be on the shoulders of Republicans. So John Thune is the majority leader. He's a lot on his shoulders right now. And I hope he realizes how history will or will not treat him well. I've met him. I don't know him well. I'm told he's a good guy who believes in America and our institutions and our Constitution. We're going to need to see that in action. So those are the 3 third rails. One of them has been failed miserably. And that really, really, really angers me.
I mean, the reason why I posed the question of you as a Democrat is because it seems like an asymmetrical fight going on. One side is playing dirty. They're lying about what happened. They're defining a fair election as only one in which their team wins.
Yep.
And the only play for Democrats seems to be to stick with the Constitution, talk about what they're doing, that they're doing the right thing, that they're standing up for the Constitution, and that it was a fair election. And but that message does nothing. I mean, it's quite literally this continues. They are continuing to undermine even just the narrative and the story of what happened on January 6th. So are Democrats doing, I mean, the right, I understand they're doing the right thing, but is it effective? Does it matter?
I don't know. I mean, you're basically describing the famous Sean Connery line in The Untouchables, "Don't bring a knife to a gunfight," which is what this smacks of. Again, I'm going to answer it maybe somewhat as a Democrat, but more as an American. The difference here is that he won, and a shocking number of people were willing to look the other way. And a shocking amount of Democrats sat on their hands and stayed home. He got somewhat more than he got in 2020. She got a lot less than Joe Biden got in 2020. And knowing full well everything you just said is absolutely up in lights, in addition to a whole lot of other, the litany of so many other things that voters knew and volitionally looked the other way, including a lot of people who should have known better, is really discouraging. So that to me goes beyond, yes, we still need to deal with this. Are we getting our message through, this knife versus gunfight? I get it, both our substance and our tactics, but tens of millions of Americans with full knowledge of what happened on January 6, 2001, and a whole lot of other stuff, still went ahead and pulled the lever. There's no evidence I've seen or heard, unless you have, or Dave has, of any real evidence of voter fraud anywhere. I'm sure the Russians played a role because they're thrilled Donald Trump's going to be president again. I'm sure the Chinese must have played some kind of role in here. But that was probably the case 4 years ago as well. It takes my breath away that with full knowledge of everything we're talking about, folks look the other way and pull the lever.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's stick with other items in the news.
Any more
this
happy
week.
notes?
No, this one is not happy. I'm sorry to say. There was the attack in New Orleans.
No.
There were a couple of New Jersey connections.
Yes.
So tell us about the two victims that you know of.
Yeah.
And I understand you're going to lower the flags to half staff.
We are. So Tiger Beck, who is not from New Jersey, but is a graduate of the class of Princeton University 2001. In fact, our son Charlie knew him, not well, but knew him. Incredible reputation, big football player, great guy. How about a guy going to Princeton where his actual name is Tiger, and they're the Princeton Tigers? You can't make that up.
And he lived in New York.
And he did. Although they're from Louisiana, mm-hmm. I believe. And then God bless and God rest his soul, and much closer to home, Billy DeMeo. I think both guys 25 years old, by the way. Billy, I know, 25 years old, from Homedale, New Jersey, from a great family, the oldest of three. Homedale High, lacrosse star, all around great guy. College in Pennsylvania, where he earned both a bachelor's and a master's. Just an incredible, crushing loss for Homedale and for the state of New Jersey. We've been back and forth with a lot of the folks who know that family well. I'm honored under Colonel Pat Callahan that Billy's remains, when they arrived back in New Jersey the other night, was given a hero's welcome by the state police, which was richly deserved. And you're absolutely right. We will, to the credit of the Louisiana governor, Jeff Landry, they're doing a day of mourning in Louisiana for each of the 14 victims who lost their lives. And Friday is Billy's day. And so we're going to lower the flags in New Jersey in his honor. It's a little tricky because they're already lowered for President Carter. But we've done this before under President George H.W. Bush's national mourning period. We lost a former legislator, and we do certain things. One of the things we're going to do is we're going to pull the so-called Carter flag down over the State House, put up a flag at half-mast specifically for Billy's memory. And then we'll take that down Friday night and get it to his family. So it's an awful, unspeakable tragedy. It separately, Nancy, has got us, as my former boss in the State Department used to say, you can't answer something with nothing. So we've almost immediately gone into review mode. Not that we haven't done it before, Remember that truck in Nice, France, that went down that esplanade and killed a bunch of people? Kind of a similar. We did a huge postmortem after that. We're doing a similar reality assessment right now. Tragically, it looks like New Orleans was given a game plan 5 years ago by an independent firm that talked about their vulnerabilities and had a game plan, and for whatever reason, this still happened, and it's just an unspeakable, awful tragedy. It's a terrorist act, number one, but it's an incredible tragedy for these families. God bless them. Please, everybody, keep all of the two guys with a Jersey nexus and their families in your prayers, but everybody who is impacted by this as well.
Listeners, we're taking your calls at 844-745-8255. And we've got folks waiting to ask the governor questions on the line. We have Laura from Bayonne. Laura, are you there?
Hey, Laura.
Hi, Governor Murphy. Yes, Laura from Bayonne. I'm actually calling because I got home 10 minutes earlier today. I've been seeing amazing times on my commute through the Holland Tunnel, saving 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at night, both for myself and my husband. This has been phenomenal. What can we do to keep congestion pricing? Governor Murphy.
Yeah, Laura, I've got mixed emotions. First of all, I'm very happy that your commute time is down. That's a good thing. And you're obviously paying more money to get that. So you'll be the judge as to whether or not that's a good value for money trade for you. Listen, I say this as a governor with, I think, the nation's strongest environmental track record over the past 7 years. By the way, I've just become the longest serving Democratic governor in the country, Nancy. So
congratulations.
Thank you, Dave. A little bit level of respect here at some point, but
we'll try.
You'll try. Not too hard, I know. So listen, we've got an incredible environmental track record. So I'm got firm ground to stand on. We're not against mitigating pollution. We're not against trying to figure out how to decongest crowded streets. We believe in climate change. We do a lot to push up against it. But unfortunately, and the federal judge said this is a very flawed program, but still let it go ahead. This is going to take it out of the hide of our commuters. And it's going to displace the pollution from Manhattan to New Jersey. And you're going to pay $6 a trip. And I'm glad to hear, Laura, that it's a faster trip. The evidence in the first few days is, for whatever reason, that the tunnels are quicker, but the congestion in Manhattan has not alleviated. So I'm not sure. We don't have enough data yet to know why that is. We are debating
fewer New Jersey drivers, but as many New York drivers.
Yeah, but it's got to add up to the same number as before, and I'm not sure how that math works. But the other question, which we're going to be looking at very carefully, is where do the people go that aren't in the tunnel with Laura that were in there last week? Did they go on a train? Possibly. That's the positive outcome from an environmental standpoint, I guess. Did they stay home in New Jersey? In which case, frankly, the economy, the little cottage economy that follows anybody around, the tea that you're drinking, the diner, the bagel, the dry cleaner. If you work in Manhattan, that follows you around in Manhattan. If you stay home in New Jersey, then that's following you around in Jersey. On the margin, that probably gives us a little bit of a boost. But this is, at the end of the day, I'm extremely unhappy. These wild assertions that we were given all these goodies and turned our back on them. I want to respect the judge because this is still an open item. Federal Highway Administration has until January 17th to address some of the concerns he's got. So I don't want to get in the details of negotiations, but what people are saying out there are patently absurd. And I hate to say it, we're not giving up. We were very reasonable about this, but we're not giving up.
So what is it you're saying that's patently absurd? Because it's been reported that New Jersey was offered $500 million for a new
in small bills, terminal. By
the way. That the renovation at Penn Station would prioritize the New Jersey terminal. and that there would be lower prices for cars that come over the George Washington Bridge. So that's what
Yeah.
I've seen reported in Politico
I've seen the same thing
about the offer from Kathy Hochul.
Yeah, I'm not going to, as I say, the judge has asked us, unlike others, I will abide by what the judge has asked. I'm not going to get any details.
But can you say, what would it take for you to drop the suit and embrace congestion pricing? Like, what would they have to give you to make it a good deal?
I appreciate the fact that you're going to keep asking me this. The one reasonable party this entire time has been New Jersey. We have been the one party that said, bring us to the table. Let's figure out something fair. Again, we come into this with our bona fides as good as anybody. In other words, I don't come to the table as I'm not sure what this guy's going to be like with the environment or pollution. I've got a track record up and down our arms in terms of what we believe in and what we stand for. And in fact, what we've done. We've been reasonable from day one. And by the way, the federal legal action we took, which people are, I think, forgetting a little bit, is that the Biden administration needed to do a full environmental impact study, which they did not do. And that if they did do that, we would live by the results. I think that's eminently reasonable. There was one reasonable party in this the entire time, including as we sit here tonight, and it's Jersey. So we'll see. We're not done by a long shot. I'm not sure what that means yet. We're looking at a bunch of different options. I'm not sure what a new federal administration, how they're going to think about this. The president-elect has said he's against congestion pricing. I'm not sure where they'll land. I know we're going to keep fighting. And again, we're trying to be reasonable here. We are trying to be reasonable, and we're the only one on that list right now.
Laura, thanks for your call. And let's take another call. We have Anthony in Edgewater on the line.
Hello, Anthony.
Hi, Governor. I'm calling because, first of all, I'd like to thank you for signing into law in May 2023 the bill that established the New Jersey Alzheimer's and Dementia Care. Sorry about the long title, but it's a long-term advisory commission.
Yep.
But this commission is pretty critical to the impact of Alzheimer's in our state. There's projected to be around 300,000 citizens with the disease over 65, which doesn't account for anyone under 65 or those that are diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And being that we don't have an office in the state that addresses this particular disease, and also considering that we're the sixth prevalence of all 50 states in the country.
I'm not sure I knew that.
Yes, and the legislation called for appointments on that commission 180 days after the law was signed, and we're now into 18 months. And I'm seeking your leadership in getting appointments to that commission.
Yeah.
And my personal reason for advocating for this is because my mother's in memory care, my father passed from disease, an uncle and two aunts.
Oh,
so
Lord.
I have a vested interest, as you may see, and I'm not sure you're aware, but 2/3 of that population are women, and African Americans are 2 times more likely than white Americans to contract the disease, and Latinos are 1.5 times more likely to contract the disease.
Got it.
And so
Anthony, I get the gravity. Trust me, and this has hit my family as well. I'm just surprised that these have not been, because we pride ourselves in filling these commissions up pretty quickly. So I've got to figure out what the issue is. Either we've done something that you're not aware of, or that you're right that we've been late to this. But this was a pretty important thing when we signed this into law. So I'd be surprised if it's the latter. But in any event, Natalie Hamilton is with me. Natalie, let's get a combination of Caitlin Bastian, our health commissioner, and Sam Parker, who runs appointments, to follow up with Anthony and get to the bottom of this, because we take this very, very seriously, as I mentioned, at a personal level, not just as governor. So thank you for weighing in and giving us a heads up.
Were you aware, Governor, that the appointments haven't been made or they haven't been confirmed, or where do things stand
No,
with that?
I'm not aware, but I'm surprised and I'm concerned, it may well be that they have been appointed and that we have not gotten the word out. But I don't know that.
Okay.
We'll run this down.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. This is Ask Governor Murphy. I'm Nancy Solomon.
You're listening to Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WNYC, and WHYY. Got a question for New Jersey's governor? Call us now at 844-745-8255. That's 844-745-TALK. Pose your question on Twitter or Facebook with the hashtag AskGovMurphy.
And we're live with Governor Phil Murphy. So let's talk about your last year in office. Sad, relieved, both?
Not relieved. The job of a lifetime. And I'm sure it'll get sad at some point, but we have a very full agenda. I'm working feverishly on our State of the State address, which I'm delivering next Tuesday at 3:00 if you're in the neighborhood. In the State House, and the list of initiatives and objectives and passions that we still have is long. And one of the litmus tests we have is we don't put anything into a speech like this unless we have a high degree of confidence that we can accomplish it. So it's not just a long list, but it's a particularly long list given it's 12 months. And my hope and objective is 25 or 50 years from now, when some historian, I'm not sure why they would, but if they look at our years in office and they look at year 8, that they would not have been able to tell in any way, shape, or form where in our 8 years that year came, that it had as much energy, as much of an agenda, as much passion as year 1, 3, 5, 7, you name it. But we have a lot to do. Haven't really focused on the melancholy side. When we kick through January 20th, I probably will begin to think through as I do things for the last time, because my last day will be January 20th of 2026. I suspect there'll be some of that in reflection, but we have our head down. We will sprint through the tape. That's the one thing I know. We're not going to sit back and pat ourselves on the back in any way.
So what would you say is the number one thing on your list that you want to get accomplished this year?
I wouldn't say there's one, but affordability will continue to be economic opportunity, the American dream, affordability, a lot of stuff around kids, continuing intense focus on equity. We had a very successful clemency initiative kickoff with names and lives changed in December. We want to do a bunch more waves of those. There are some parole reforms that we need to do. Our current parole realities, particularly as it relates to technicalities, is from I don't know when, but they need to be refreshed and updated. A lot more emphasis, continued emphasis, I should say, on building our strategic innovation hubs, which are big generators of startups. New Jersey had lost its way in the startup business front, and I'm happy to say we've reclaimed our mantle, but we want to do more there. There's a lot on the list, but I'd begin with economic opportunity, affordability, American dream, not just for some, but for everybody. There'll be a big dose of that.
Housing is a huge piece of
Yep.
the affordability problem, both the need to build more housing and more affordable housing, and also property taxes, in my humble opinion, contributes to the affordability issue. And particularly, I mean, it's not just homeowners, because landlords pass on the costs onto their renters.
Which is why our anchor program is historic in many respects, including it deals with renters in a very aggressive way, which is a new thing in our state. Property tax relief.
Do you feel like anchor is it for you, that's enough?
Listen, I don't know about that, but we've done a lot in other programs as well. The anchor is sort of the centerpiece, but we've done a lot for seniors through different programs. Stay NJ continues to be out there as a very compelling program. Senior freeze.
Is that moving forward? Stay New Jersey? I just haven't heard about it in many months.
Yeah, it is, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we got to make sure that all of these, including Anchor, that we can afford all this. That's the one thing I want to. We've done so much to get this state back into some semblance of fiscal shape, given the wreck that we inherited. Yes to all the above, including Anchor and senior freeze and all this sort of stuff, with the caveat we got to make sure we're walking out of here handing the state, in many respects, but as a fiscal matter, an attractive state of play. So everything is subject to that. But yeah, all those programs are very compelling, and they knock property tax levels back. We means test everything. So in other words, up to a certain amount of income, depending on how much your income is, you get knocked back 10 or 12 years, which is that's a showstopper reality. And I want to continue that. And again, our seniors are incredibly important in that mix.
So we have David Mathow of WHYY and WBGO here with us, monitoring social questions. What do you have for us?
Well, Nancy, interestingly, a question that we were sort of just having a discussion about. Before I ask the question from James from East Windsor, Governor, I know I speak for Nancy in saying in your final year, we look forward to a huge party for the media, a big bash, probably in your backyard. So that's one thing that we're both looking forward to.
Okay.
Speak for yourself.
Okay. James from
I don't think we'll be doing that tonight, given
No,
the temperature I just walked in from, right?
Right. James from East Windsor says, greetings, Governor. What happened to liquor license reform in the Garden State? And how can voters help to make that happen?
Yeah, James, I'm going to ask Natalie, let's get Dennis Eveloff, our head of policy, to follow up with James. By the way, East Windsor is a great community with a great mayor, Janice Mironoff, who's just been a mayor for a long time and does a great job. It's a marvelous community. It's happening. It's happening. It didn't happen at the scale I wanted, but it's happening. Our liquor license laws are Depression era. And it's one license per X thousands of residents. And we're probably one of the hardest states to get a license in America. And that holds back especially family-owned small businesses, restaurants, and bars. But the good news is we got a good chunk of what we wanted done. And we, in fact, just had a discussion about this the other day. It is moving, and we're so-called redistributing the so-called pocket licenses that were sort of being held but not utilized. We've changed the reality for mall licenses, and that's happening. All of it a little slower, honestly, than I would like, but it's happening. And again, the more you look, we're sitting across from Red Bank. I'll just pick Broad Street and Red Bank. You see what that does to transform, particularly in warm weather when you got tables outside and you got restaurant after restaurant, a couple of bars. You got a festive European feel on those streets. it transforms main streets. So we're doing what we got done a chunk of what we wanted, and I'm happy about that. I'd like to see it a little faster than it is, but it's moving, and hopefully we'll have the proper license ready for that party that you want to have in the backyard.
Wonderful.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. We have Dennis on the line from Rahway. Hey, Dennis.
Hello, Dennis.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
Hello.
Good evening.
Oh, good evening, Mr. Murphy. I'm a union steam fitter here in New Jersey, and my question for you relates to what are you doing in the face of what seems to be an openly hostile administration incoming federally to the labor movement and labor power in general, to help protect New Jersey, which has historically been a bastion of labor power, and to protect the hundreds of thousands of New Jerseyans who work under the protection of collective bargaining and a union contract. I'd love to hear one actionable item from you, sir, that you would bring to the legislature, or at least sell from your bully pulpit in the final year of your administration.
Yeah, it's a good question, Dennis. I'm going to ask Rob Sarangelo, our labor commissioner, to reach out to you. Natalie, please help me with that. And by the way, Rahway is another town that I love. Ray Jacoby's the mayor, and it's a really good quintessential Jersey town. Let me say, Dennis, we start in a really good place. Period. So we are, I think you've said this in your own words, we're the quintessential American organized labor state, period. And when you start in a good place, unless the rule of law is thrown out the window, actions against labor per se are going to be very difficult to prosecute by this new administration. Not to mention the fact, I believe the evidence is significant that the building trades rank and file went in a pretty big way toward President-elect Trump. And so I will, when I walk out of here in a year, I will have been the longest serving Democratic governor alongside a Trump presidency. I've already had 3 years alongside of him, and we found common ground. And the evidence, at least in the experience that I have had with him and his team, has been fairly benign to, I'm not sure I'd use the word constructive, but labor issues have not been sort of in the vortex of, and I think it's partly for the reason I mentioned, he had a lot of support out of labor, not necessarily out of the service unions or the public sector unions, which I think went big time the other way. But as a steam fitter, Dennis, I think you and your brothers and sisters in the broader community, I think he's the guy. When he was campaigning the first time, he said, "I'm the only candidate for president in American history that knows what rebar is." And you made a big deal out of that in front of a labor crowd. My bigger concern, which relates to labor, my bigger concern is just because of reasons that are beyond me, he's going to take an economic path that is discriminatory toward enormous opportunities, not just economic, but labor, trade, job opportunities. And offshore wind is at the top of the list. Somebody somewhere has convinced him that this is woke. And all I could say is he ain't sat with the IBEW folks or the carpenters. These are, in New Jersey alone, thousands of building trades jobs. The offshore wind industry, as we're prosecuting it at least, is almost 100% organized. Really good, high-paying jobs. Some cases dangerous, by the way, underwater welding and things that are not easy or for the faint of heart. That's what I worry about more, Dennis. That he'll make some arbitrary decision, and offshore wind is the best example I've got. With that industry, I don't like that. It's woke. I don't want windmills up. Come on, man.
Well, he did promise the oil and gas executives that if they gave him money, he would do whatever they wanted.
Yeah, well, that probably says a lot, right? But interestingly enough, not offshore wind, but onshore wind. Texas, I think, has more windmills than any state in America. Iowa might be second. I forget the third, but they're all red states. So I think that to me is, it may not be for steam fitters, in fairness to your question, but the big to do, in my opinion, is to help us make the case that something smart for the economy and smart for labor should be smart for President Trump. That to me is a win-win-win. And that's going to be, I think, at least so far as I look out prospectively, that's an area of concern.
Thanks for your call, Dennis. And let's go back to questions online. David Matthau, what do you have for us?
Oliver from Lawrence writes, Governor, we are an artisan family-owned creamery and farm making award-winning cheeses from our own grass-fed cow's milk for over 20 years. The Department of Health Dairy Project has put us and several other farms under an extreme embargo at the worst possible time, and this will lead to farm business shutting down and 20 people losing their jobs if nothing is done. Over the past 20 years of production, we've never had any health violations and have always had good relationships with the Department of Health prior to last month. We know that you value agriculture and sustainability in Jersey. What can you do to help our small farm business that does big things not be crushed by extreme regulations?
I mean, that's a very discouraging question to get. First of all, Natalie, let's get, again, Caitlin, who I know is listening, our great commissioner of the Department of Health, Caitlin Bashton, to follow up. I have to say, I'm not familiar with why this has happened, so I don't want to kid Oliver to make him think I know why he's being singled out here. So I'll have Caitlin follow up with him. But as he describes his family business, like, that's in the sweet spot of what we cherish in this state, what we desire to have more of. Our buddy Jack Curtis, who called in about the farmland assessment, was basically, it wasn't just that there were wealthy homeowners doing a loophole, it was coming at the expense of the real farmers. And I'm not sure I know Oliver's family. I know several of the dairy farms in and around Mercer County.
Did you mention the name Cherry Grove, I think?
Cherry Grove Farm.
I'm not sure I know Cherry Grove. But Tammy has sort of put the word down that Drumthwack at the governor's mansion will serve Jersey wines, Jersey spirits, Jersey beer, and wherever we can, Jersey food and Jersey ingredients. So we bring dairy farms in, actually, for receptions to have cheese and bread, all done locally. In fact, in Mercer County, as Oliver's family business is. So I got to say, Oliver, if you're listening, I'll have Caitlin follow up. You are exactly the sort of small business that we cherish in this state. We want the real farmers to have a level playing field. We are the Garden State, after all. And I'm curious myself to know how this has come about. I'm sure there's some kind of rationale, and I hope whatever it is, we can get to a good common ground and get you back on your feet again.
You know, this sort of speaks to, I think, a larger issue, which is that, I mean, we get so many calls and emails and questions, you know, especially in between the shows, from people who are frustrated because they can't get a live person from a state agency on the phone to help them with their problem. So they call into the show because they want you to pay attention, send your person out to help them with their problem.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine.
Which usually works, by the way.
Right. It's so good if you can talk to the governor.
That shows them that they're smart, too.
But in terms of, I mean, okay, so you've got a year left. What can be done to make New Jersey government more responsive, so when someone's in crisis, they can get help from the agency that they need to get?
This will not make Oliver feel any better. This is a little bit like we were discussing before the show on when we had all the overwhelming unemployment claims, motor vehicle claims. I'd put our time frame up against any state in America. That's not going to make him feel any better. Generative artificial intelligence. That's why we're so heavily invested in it. That will allow all of our state workers to upskill themselves, spend much more time on issues of substance and a lot less time on issues that can be banged out through like permitting applications can be much more streamlined with generative AI. Call center, a lot of call center basic stuff can be, and we're investing heavily in that, probably unlike any other American state right now. That to me is the salvation to this question of, can I get a live person or can I get an answer?
Okay, we're going to take a quick break and be right back. This is Ask Governor Murphy. I'm Nancy Solomon.
You're listening to Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WNYC, and WHYY. Got a question for New Jersey's governor? Call us now at 844-745-8255. That's 844-745-TALK. Or pose your question on Twitter or Facebook with the hashtag AskGovMurphy.
We are live with Governor Phil Murphy and taking your calls. So give a call and ask your question of the governor. So I wanted to talk about, there was an interesting story in Politico this week about new information that's come out in a federal investigation into the New York and New Jersey nursing homes during COVID, which when the Department of Justice embarked on that, I think at the time, on this show, you talked about the fact that you thought you were being, as a Democrat, being targeted politically by the Trump administration over that Department of Justice investigation. And now the new report discloses that an email sent in October of 2020 at the DOJ, right before the election of 2020, in which a Trump Department of Justice official wrote about letters to various federal divisions about New York and New Jersey nursing homes and said, quote, "Would like to package them together and let the New York Post break it. Will be our last play on them before election, but it's a big one."
How nice.
You must feel vindicated.
Yeah, and outraged. And forget about how I feel. People should be outraged that you can weaponize the Justice Department like that. And that's my fear, as I mentioned earlier, about will the Senate do the right job and make sure we have people who are calling balls and strikes, particularly in the Justice Department. But it's an outrage. And people should, more importantly than I'm outraged, people should be outraged. That's just an awful example of weaponizing government for political reasons. It's just not on. It's just not how this operates or should operate. And remember, this was a big challenge. Judy Persicelli and I, Dave Mathau was in the front row for most of these 250 something press conferences. We went out of our way to say, listen, when you're first of all, these are homes. These residences they're not renting a hotel room. These seniors are coming back into their residences. This is their permanent home. But you had to segregate minimally by floor, better by wing, even better yet by building. Now, did some folks violate that? Unfortunately, among the operators, I fear they did. We also segregated healthcare staff, not just the patients or not just the residents. So we took that so seriously. Again, that's not to say there weren't some bad apples out there, but we were so careful on that one because we were getting crushed in nursing homes. If you did everything right, you were getting crushed in nursing homes. The reality, the thing that really angers me and should anger folks about that, by the time that text was sent, was it a text or an email? I forget which, about the New York Post. Either way,
I think,
yeah. And at the end, when the story was ultimately written on COVID and nursing homes and long-term care, places like Texas and Florida and other places were far and away the bigger issues in terms of sickness, fatalities, infections, which is another reason should outrage people. Can I change subject for 1 second?
Sure.
I was trying to, there were two things I wanted to come back to. One is, I just got the number. There are 1,356, I hope James is listening from East Windsor, liquor licenses that are currently in process to get redistributed. Not on the street yet, but that's the number. And also my team has just told me that we have sent a lot of these commissions, and this is the Alzheimer's Commission in particular, a lot of commissions, we get X number of seats, the Senate president gets Y number, speaker gets Z, and then there's a pub at-large group. We have put our names onto that commission, and God willing, I'm not sure what the status of the other folks are, but I want to reiterate that that's something, I think it was Anthony who raised that, that's something. We'll still have Caitlin and Sam Parker follow up with them, but that's something that we take very seriously.
Okay, we're getting
real time
reporting in real
Exactly.
time. Okay, let's go back to the phones. We have Alyssa from Blackwood on the phone.
Hey, Alyssa.
Hi, Governor Murphy. Can you hear me?
I can. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you so much for taking my question. I actually have two. So the first one is, will there be more trains added into and out of Penn Station to help with more people taking the trains due to congestion pricing? And then my second one is, I commute out of the Hamilton station to Penn Station, and both escalators have been out of service for over a year. And in 2024, in the fall, signs had been posted that repairs have been postponed until 2027. And the elevator is also out of service sometimes. So I just kind of wanted to know why are repairs being postponed? It's very difficult for some people to only take the stairs.
Yeah. That second one is beyond embarrassing. I mean, I don't even know how to put together a sentence.
The look of the exasperation on your face is pretty good.
So I'm going to ask Kevin Corbett, who has done a hell of a job in his last day, actually, as CEO of NJ Transit. It's a week from today, and I wish him the very best. I've said this recently, if I have the toughest job in state government, I think Kevin had the second toughest. But the second part of your question is unforgivable and inexcusable. Kevin will reach out to you, and God willing, there's a good answer. But delaying it since 2024 to 2027 is not a good answer. And by the way, Hamilton Station is an area that will be transformed. We talk about transit-oriented development. Hamilton is one of the top ones on our list to completely transform that. A la Woodbridge, which is happening as we speak. These will be incredibly, as I mentioned, the word is transformative projects for the community. Kevin will answer the second and the first question, but on the first one, this is part of the issue with congestion pricing that I've had. It isn't just that our commuters have to pay more. It isn't just that the pollution is just displaced as opposed to eliminated. It's the timing. Before we got here, my predecessor had canceled the Hudson Tunnel project. It had a different name at that point. And we were dragging our feet on the Port Authority bus terminal forever. We're now finally moving both of those in a big way. But it's going to take a while for them to get done. And there are real capacity issues in terms of how many trains you can shoot through the tunnels that exist. The two tunnels that exist, by the way, remind everybody, finished in 1911. That was before both Dave and I were born. 1911.
You didn't include me in that.
I did not, Nancy.
You think I'm older than that?
No, I'm smarter than that. Secondly, they were damaged severely over the years, especially with Superstorm Sandy. As I mentioned, my predecessor canceled the two new ones. So the project that's happening now will be to build two new tunnels, rail tunnels, get them up and running, rehab the old ones. So we'll have 4 tunnels under the Hudson. That'll mean, Alyssa, to your question, there is a moment when you can put more cars and or more trains on. There will be a moment when there will probably double the amount of one-seat rides into Manhattan. I think that's an understatement. This will be transformative, but it ain't today, thanks to what came before us.
10 years?
Probably 8 to 10. We're going fast as heck. The Portal North Bridge, which is the first piece of Gateway, is on time and under budget, which is encouraging. Mm-hmm. I think that says something about what will follow in terms of the other pieces of the project. So the answer is, at the moment, I don't know that we can get more trains. And that's another reason why this was ill-conceived. This is, by the way, first and foremost, and they will admit it, don't take my word for it, take the MTA's word, this is first and foremost to help them fill a huge budget hole. That's what this is. So this is not, I know the environmentalists have rightfully gotten on board, and they should, and I get that, and I respect that. That's not the primary reason MTA is doing this. I want everyone out there to know this is cold-blooded cash. That's what this is.
So the short answer, Alyssa, is that it won't be anytime soon that there'll be more trains.
I hope there'll be an escalator soon, though.
But yes,
that's completely under our control.
Your call may result in quicker action on the escalator. Okay, let's stay with the phones because we have Jeffrey from Marlborough who's been waiting a long time there on the line.
Hey, Jeffrey.
Hello, Governor. I've enjoyed your governorship since the very beginning when I first met you from a crowd at Eagleton's presentation sometime about a year before you became governor. So
I remember it.
Thank you very much.
Nice to reconnect.
So my question is about these warehouses that are being built in the mid-state area along Route 33 and Plainsboro and that area. Are there plans to put solar panels on the roofs of these big warehouses for either supporting the electricity generation to put back into the grid or for community solar? That's level one of the question. Second level is we're now going to have the Trump administration, and what might you be doing in the last year of your governorship in terms of climate change support?
Yeah, playing a lot of defense is, if we were a football team, I fear. The answer, I'm going to have, again, asked Dennis Eveloff, our head of policy, and his energy experts to follow up with you, Jeffrey, on the first part of your question, which is the answer is not in all cases, but in most. And where we have done panels on the roof, it's been transformative. And we kicked off several years ago. I've got a little issue with heights. I've never admitted that before on your program. And I had to climb up on a roof when we kicked off our community solar. We had a big issue, and boy, that was a day I'll never forget. Not comfortable, huh? It was not comfortable at all. But the ability to generate power into a community solar program has been one of the big positives out of these flat roof warehouses. And so it's not all, but it's most in my experience. And I'll have Dennis follow up and give you a more precise answer. On Trump and climate, my big concern is right now around offshore wind. He reiterated this yesterday in his press conference, not specific to New Jersey, but he's been sold a line of reasoning.
He said the wind farms are driving the whales crazy.
Honest to God, I mean, as we all know, the whole "you're killing the whales" thing was funded by the fossil fuel industry, right? So to your point earlier, Nancy, we know this, where this is coming from. But Jeffrey, I have to say this. I have not heard him say anything. If you have, let me know about solar. I think solar is much more part of the woodwork these days, part of the furniture. Mm-hmm. I think it's sort of, we're beyond that. And we should also realize that we as a nation, Jimmy Carter, by the way, deserves a shout out here. He was ahead of his time and his progress was undone by his successor. The Chinese have stolen, to say they've stolen a march on us in the solar panel business is the understatement of the century, which is unfortunate, but I don't think solar is in anyone's gun hairs or gun sights. crosshairs rather. I think you're going to see a lot more interest in nuclear power. And the environmental community is split on that, which I respect. Some folks actually in the community are big fans of it because it's carbon neutral, and others get concerned just because, rightfully, nuclear comes with a lot of hair on it, as they say.
Trump has said that he wants to drill for oil and gas off all the coasts.
No question about it. And then President Biden yesterday banned that. He tried to do that in his first term. We were able to push back on that on a bipartisan basis. Chris Smith, Republican congressman here, stood with me and with Frank Pallone. Chris has a big chunk of the shore, and he knows. I think some of the stuff transcends partisan affiliation, and that's a good example where when you've got an economy, put aside the memories and the good times on the shore, this is a big part of our economy, and you're putting that at risk if you're drilling and running the risk that you're going to have some sort of an accident, which unfortunately happens with pretty fair regularity. Look at the Gulf of Mexico a dozen years ago.
You mean the Gulf of America?
I meant the Gulf of America, yes. I did not mean Greenland in that case, but yes. But anyway, Jeffrey, Dennis will follow up with you, particularly on what we do, and he'll be more facile at this than I, to either somewhere between encourage or, I wouldn't say mandate, but to get as many panels on the roofs of these warehouses as possible.
New subject. Right before the end of the year, you granted clemency to 33 prisoners in New Jersey and shortened the sentences of 3 others. We talked about this last summer after you announced a new approach to clemency. I know you worked with the New Jersey chapter of the ACLU on this. So tell us a little bit about the new approach and the 33 people who received the clemency.
Yeah, it was a pretty emotional process and day. We announced this program in June at St. James AME Church with our dear friend Dr. Slaughter in Newark. And we had our first wave of names in December. And it was a combination, mostly pardons and 3 commutations. With a very rigorous process. We have an independent board that does this as a volunteer reality with some really impressive members from all sides of the judicial and law enforcement communities and victims communities, et cetera, including former prosecutors. Justin Dews, a dear friend, former colleague, former Biden White House lawyer, chairs it. So they give us their recommendations. Our team does a rigorous vet. Ultimately, yours truly goes name by name, literally. Incredibly emotional. For folks who may not be familiar, what a pardon is, pure and simple, you've already served your time. So this is basically impacting your record, which could have a huge impact on getting a promotion, being able to travel freely, lots of things in society, licenses that you couldn't get before. Commutation means we have 3 women, victims of domestic violence, who committed murder and admitted so. They literally walked out of prison 2 or 3 days after I spoke to them. They literally walked out. And it's one thing to get pardoned, and that's transformative, but to literally walk out a few days after that happened, and just the emotion was overwhelming for them, for sure, but for me personally. I say first wave, we're hoping to do many more waves this year, so stay tuned.
Okay, thank you, Governor. You've been listening to Ask Governor Murphy, a co-production of WBGO, WHYY, and WNYC. Many thanks to David Mathau, Joseph Capriglione, Luke Green, Matt Mirando, and Wayne Schulmeister, Leora Noam Kravitz. The show is directed by Doug Doyle. I'm Nancy Solomon. Good night.